Welcome back to It's Not Normal, the podcast, episode 4. Today, I want to talk to you about having nice things done for you, and then later, those same things being used against you or held over your head. This all started with a TikTok that I posted a couple weeks ago, talking about being on my parents' phone plan until I moved out when I was 21. And the first thing that I want to get into are some of the comments that I got on this video, centered around the idea that once you turn 18, you're considered an adult. Grow up, stop complaining, pay your own way. And I understand that method of thinking to a certain extent. But what I think these people fail to realize about narcissistic parents is when you're living under their roof, you don't always have the option to be independent. And that was exactly the case with me. When I was in my early 20s, I had a job. I easily would have been able to pay for my own phone bill each month. But anytime I brought that idea to my parents, they would insist that I stay on their phone plan. Initially, this was a want for privacy. I was under the assumption for the longest time that because I was on my parents' phone plan, because it was their account and they paid the bill, that not only could they see the phone numbers and the timestamps of my phone calls and text messages, but they could also see the content of the messages. They could see anything that I had on my phone. And this, for a long time, sort of dictated who I would talk to, how often I would talk to them, the things that I would say to them. And there was a lot of paranoia that went along with this also because I couldn't control what was being said on the other end. And so I was always scared that whoever I was talking to might say something that my parents would see and not like, and then that was going to be a problem. And so I was really paranoid for a long time that anything that I said or did on my phone, which was supposed to be a more personal and private thing, I knew that I wasn't paying for it, but it was given to me by my parents. It was considered my phone. And the thought that I couldn't even be free to do and say things that I wanted on there, because at the drop of a hat, everything could be made public and used against me. And so initially, anytime I would think about getting my own phone plan, it was for those reasons, just so I could feel less paranoid about who I was talking to. I wouldn't have the idea that if I ever did or said anything wrong that my parents didn't like, then they could pull up my phone records and my text messages and they can kind of use all of these very personal things against me. I hated the fact that they could kind of dangle that in front of my face. And so I just wanted to feel a bit more independent. But whenever I would bring that to my parents' attention initially, it was just kind of brushed off or painted as a more negative thing where it was, you don't need that, don't worry about it. It's really no problem. Just stay on our phone plan. It's fine. If you ever pushed for it a little bit more and you kind of insisted like, no, I want to be on my own phone plan. I want to not be on your bill anymore. They would take it so far as to guilt trip you, where, if we drop your line, then we can't afford anything anymore because we don't get the family plan, and then your siblings won't have cell phones, and that's all going to be your fault. And looking back at it, hindsight is 20/20, I suppose, but looking back at it, I never thought to call bullshit on these things. I never thought to question these things or to even just say, that's not my problem. That's not my responsibility. You feel so guilty because you entertain these really negative, hypothetical kind of stretches of the truth that your parents present to you in an attempt to control you and to get you to do the thing that they want you to do, that's exactly what you do. You let them guilt trip you and you kind of stay on their phone plan. You do exactly what it is that they want you to do without even knowing it. This really became more of an issue for me when I started dating my husband. When my husband and I got together, that was when mine and my parents' relationship really started to take a turn. And I remember telling him early on in our relationship that it has nothing to do with him specifically as a person, just the fact that I am calling him boyfriend and that I'm going out and doing things with him and he is taking me away from my parents. I'm spending time and energy outside of the house. They will not like that. They will not like him. And so that was when mine and my parents' relationship really started to take a bit more of a negative turn. And I felt like they cracked down on everything. They were stricter with me than they had ever been. They were just doing things to make my life so much harder and more complicated in an attempt to just have me give up, I think, and just say, you know what, this is not worth it. I barely even know this guy. We're only a couple months in and I just can't take it anymore. So I'm just going to give in and I'm going to say, fuck it. I'm done. But I didn't do that. I remember being at work one day and I had plans. Back when I was probably 19, I bought a van. And it was a 1995 Chevy G20, and it was beautiful. And I bought it on Facebook Marketplace for $900. And I figured, listen, even if it's not mechanically sound, I can save up money over time, put money into it, and then I'll have a dope van that I can travel in. I always liked the idea of traveling, of taking a road trip, and I was really getting into van life at this time also. So I buy this van. But the thing is, when I bought this van, because I was 19, I went with my dad, and he insisted that his name was on the title because for car insurance, it would be cheaper since I was under 25. Okay, that made sense. My money was used to buy that van. Just putting that out there. So one day, a couple months after I meet my husband, I get up to go to work in the morning, and I'm looking for the keys to the van. And I don't see them. They're not where I left them. So I ask my parents where the keys are. And they say, why? And I was like, well, I'm taking my van to work today because after work, I'm going to take him to a mechanic so I can see what's wrong. I can see kind of what I have to put into him so I have a little bit more of an idea of how much I have to save. Now, I believe that my parents were under the assumption that I was going to fix up this van and take a road trip with Brandon. And they were absolutely right. They did not want that to happen. So they took the keys and they hid them. And my dad told me, listen, he is not safe enough for you to drive to work. You are not allowed to drive him. Meanwhile, I had driven him the day before, a couple of days before. I had taken him to work before. I drove him when my dad's truck broke down for the next week or so. It was a lie. It was pure fabrication. They just didn't want me to take the van. And so they took the keys and they did not let me take the van to work. And that day, I remember being so frustrated, and I was at work. I was in the middle of a work day. I was not available for phone calls or to reply to paragraphs of text messages. And I think because it had been a heated morning, I was getting lots of text messages and lots of phone calls, and I just wasn't able to answer them. And then at one point, I saw one from my dad where he said, if you stop answering my messages or my phone calls, and if you don't reply to them quicker, I'm going to turn your phone off. Now, I was at work. I needed my phone to get to the different places that I had to go throughout the day. I needed maps. I had to be able to contact my coworkers to see what the plan was, where they were, what we were doing. So now, not only was this affecting my personal life, it was affecting my professional life. It was affecting my job. And that was when it really became an issue. I still felt at the time like there was nothing I could do about it because I was still living under their roof and I was kind of subject to whatever they wanted me to do. And I was still not entirely realizing that they were using this as a way to control me. And this translated to other things: car insurance, health insurance, anything that I wanted or needed that my parents provided for me, that at one point or another I took at face value for just being kind and helpful and generous. So many of these things were now being dangled in front of my face, and they were being used to say, hey, listen, if you don't do this or if you don't act in this way, I'm going to take this away from you. And it's so sad how this happens in relationships between parents and their children. I remember bringing up the idea to my parents a couple summers of getting a summer job. My friends were getting summer jobs or doing some kind of a summer program, and I just remember thinking that would be cool. You know, it'd be cool to kind of experience that and to do something productive during the summertime, maybe make some of my own money so I could go off and do some things on my own. And anytime I would bring this up to my parents, it was almost as if I wasn't allowed to get a summer job. They would always paint it in such a negative light and question why I would even want to do something like that. They would reassure me that if I ever needed anything or needed any money during the summer, that they would just take care of it. And when you're 14, 15, 16 years old on summer vacation and you haven't removed yourself from that environment yet, you don't really know what the outside world is like. You kind of just take these things at face value. It's so much easier to just believe your parents and to not question their intentions, where it's, okay, great, I guess I don't need a summer job, that's awesome. But looking back at it now, I realized that they didn't want me to do these things because, one, it would make me far less available to them. If I was working, then that was more time spent outside of the house. That was less time that I was available to them if they needed help with something or they wanted to do something. If they wanted to take a family drive and I had work that day, that was going to be a problem. And two, if I was working and making my own money, maybe I was going to be a little bit more financially independent. Maybe that was going to gain me a little bit of freedom to do things that I wanted to do throughout the summer, which again would take me away from them. Maybe I would meet a friend at work and we would want to hang out afterwards. More time away from my parents. And so it took me a long time to realize that the reason that they deterred me from doing all of these things that otherwise I genuinely believe parents would be happy to hear. They would be excited that their kid wanted to take the initiative in the summer to be responsible and to get a job and to start saving money. The reason that they deterred me from all of these things is because they wanted me to remain dependent. They didn't want me to be able to pay for things on my own. They wanted me to have to ask them for money because then they could ask me what I was using it for, where I was going, who I was going with, when I would be back. It's so convoluted. And it's so sad that this is the nature of so many people's relationships with their parents. When you experience this in so many different aspects of your life for an extended period of time, especially, this can follow you into your adulthood and into your other relationships, like so many aspects of a relationship with narcissists. This can kind of follow you into your adulthood and manifest itself in you feeling really uncomfortable asking other people for help, or accepting help from other people in any capacity. You find yourself questioning their motives, their intentions, wondering why they're doing this nice thing for you. You're fearful that they might hold it over your head or use it against you at some point. They might guilt trip you into doing something that you don't want to do because, hey, this one time I did that thing for you. And so it can really result in you wanting nothing more than being completely independent and self-sufficient. And that can be isolating at times because not everyone has negative motivations. I realized that the only way for me to be free from the control of my parents was to one by one sort of systematically remove everything in my life that they had control over, everything that they could use against me or as a way to control me. And that was everything from my phone plan to my car insurance to just the basic necessities of life that you grow used to living with your parents: food, a roof over your head. And what made this especially difficult for me was how quickly this transition happened. One day I was living in my parents' house, sharing a room with my sister, just kind of living my life as I had lived it for 21 years. The next day I was living somewhere completely different. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a phone. I had to start from square one. And I had to do this not only without the support of my parents, but kind of in spite of them. And there was part of me, especially in the beginning, where whenever I would do these things and I would kind of take these steps forward to become more independent, I would feel happy because I knew that I was doing the right thing and kind of standing on my own 2 feet for the first time in a lot of ways. But then there was also part of me that kind of felt like I was betraying my parents by going off and doing something on my own. And that can be really confusing because it's a positive thing to kind of take responsibility, to pay your own way, to become independent as an adult, as you sort of move into adulthood, is a really positive thing. And that gets so convoluted when you grow up in an environment where so long dependency is preferred. And anytime you express any sort of interest in doing something on your own for yourself, it's painted in a really negative light and you're deterred from doing that thing. And you don't always know why. I didn't know why for a really long time. I took these things at face value because I genuinely believed for the longest time that my parents had my best interest in mind. I didn't think that there was any sort of convoluted motivation behind what they were doing. And the sad part is I don't even know if they knew or if they know now. But looking back, it's so clear. In the time since I've moved out of my parents' house, I've definitely gotten better at accepting help from other people. I still find it hard sometimes to ask people to do things for me, but it's more so because I feel like I don't want to be a burden to them. I feel like if I can do something on my own, then it's probably better that I do it on my own. But I've definitely kind of recognized that not everyone that is of assistance to you in one way or another is going to use that in a negative way down the road. And so that's something that's really important to kind of consider as you move forward in life, as an adult, kind of taking these steps to stand on your own 2 feet. That's about all that I've got for today, but I will be diving into the comment section of the TikTok that I posted. I've gotten thousands of comments from people kind of sharing their individual stories in there, and I want to get into some of those. So if you're interested in seeing that, head over to my Patreon. I've got that link down below. Also down below, you'll find the like and subscribe button. Those 2 things totally help me out on this channel, especially because I'm just getting it started. So thank you so much for sticking around. I really appreciate it. And I will be back very soon with another episode of It's Not Normal. Let's keep it moving,